Ashley and Nick. That was really great, and I think a fantastic way to kick off our afternoon sessions. Up next, we have a really exciting session, Unlocking Digital Biomarkers, what works, what doesn't, what's next. So there's still a lot of misnomers in the industry about what digital biomarkers truly are. And our team, along with the Panagora team, put together a great panel, including Tom Switzer from our own Genentech here, to come and talk a little bit more about what this means beyond the shiny objects, what are the real opportunities, and how can we really integrate these in our research to elevate not only the data that we receive, but the patient experience. So I'd like to welcome Tom, Dudley, and Sachin to the stage.
Looking at a new horizon. Oh, I can hear the future calling. Oh, over the Atlantic Ocean, echo inside my bones. Gonna get this started.
Fireside. What a fireside chat without the faux fire in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, well, I get the clicker, so I get the conch. So I get to speak.
Sort of.
Nice. I'm the Lord of the Flies. This panel's a little different. It's sort of a fireside chat, sort of a panel. We got some questions that'll come on our slides, and I need to figure out how to do this. And then we'll riff on those questions. What do you think, guys? Should we do a quick introduction first?
Sure.
All right, yeah. I'm Dudley Tabakin. I'm CEO of VivoSense. VivoSense are a wearable sensors CRO. We focus on taking wearable sensors through the clinical trial process, from strategy to operationalization, analysis, and to regulatory filing, although that's not been done yet. But we're going to do that soon, and we'll talk about it. Tom?
Yeah, so Tom Switzer. I actually have been at Genentech for about 15 years, and about 10 years before that at a large CRO. Formal title is a principal scientist in our Sensor Data Insights group and our computational sciences, computational medicine group. So we really focus on how do we use technology to develop endpoints to show therapeutics, really focusing on early development space. So focusing on endpoints, whether they're biomarkers or outcomes measures as such, and how do we use technology in that context.
And I'm Sachin, digital biomarker lead at GSK. Medical doctor by background, but been in this space, health technology space, for about 8 years now. And we focus on the implementation and validation of digital measurements to capture endpoints, hopefully one day to capture a primary or secondary endpoint in our drugs that are going through development.
Okay. Let's see what happens. Oh, there we go.
That one.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So, big picture. Why are digital biomarkers from wearable technologies critical for the future of clinical trials, and where do you see the biggest impact today? And how do they align with strategies like precision medicine and patient-centric research? Anyone want to jump in?
I'll kick it off. One of the things that we're seeing, I mean, again, in the space for about 10 years, and it's like starting off modest, we're finally starting to see evidence come out and realizing that often our endpoints are really anchored to when a trial unblinds. So it may take us 4 years, we'll collect a lot of data, but we can't share anything until the trial unblinds, which is not good when you want to show results quick. People want to see quick wins, and it's like, no, you just have to be patient. But we're starting to see that, and I think initially I'm starting to see value across indications at sort of denoising endpoints, where sometimes when you have traditional measures, you have a single point in time, but when you can do sort of repeat measures over several days, you can see that sort of intraday variability, and you realize maybe your MCID, your minimally clinically important difference, isn't good when you have a 40% variability in day-over-day measures. And for example, we presented it at ATS and ERS a little bit, some work we did in cough. And we saw that with an objective cough measure. The standard measure was a 24-hour cough count. People listened to it. But when we looked at that over a 2-week period, you'd see 40 to 70% day-over-day variability in that. And so you need to have a more sensitive measure of what it's like for that patient, and then maybe you can do some phenotyping and some things like that. And you're starting to see that other measures where patients need to travel in, and you can't have them come in and do a microperimetry test for ophthalmology for 8 days where they have to travel an hour or keep them hospitalized. Maybe you can find a way to do that in the home and cluster those measurements and sort of get a better representation of what's happening with the patients and really starting to see that emerge across diseases, that sort of clustering, which is a way of getting it in a real-world setting in the patient's home in a way that's more convenient, but also actually really helps us understand that day-over-day variability that we see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, building on that, for me, it's all around the person-centered focus on clinical research. So how do we show that our assets or an intervention is actually impacting people in their every day-to-day life? And currently, the best way to measure that is subjectively through, say, patient diaries, PROs, ClinROs, whatever they may be. So for me, digital measurements, and I call them measurements, not biomarkers, but we can save that conversation for another time. But digital measurements for me is that adding that objectivity to something that is truly subjective and moving away, as Tom was saying, from snapshot observations of patients who, that obviously there'll be huge variability in those snapshots, to actually getting a better picture over time as to how these people are doing. Disease states are complex. I was talking to someone at lunchtime that has a chronic disease, and they were talking about how their disease fluctuates so much just on a day-by-day basis, yet we're expected to tell you a drug works or how a patient feels by, maybe 6 site visits versus collecting continuous passive data collection that actually reflects what they're doing. So for me, the person-centeredness around the value digital measurements adds is the biggest impact it's going to have on patients. And we've seen by all the talks today around the increasing focus on what do patients actually want. My recent experience with a regulatory interaction was our evidence around the meaningful aspect of health for patients just wasn't strong enough, despite us having conducted qualitative research necessary. They wanted just more rigor around the research, around why are we actually doing this. So that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just reiterate on that patient-centric research, because Sachin this morning talked about meaningful aspects of health and just now. And we're finding that the evidence is out there. If you go and talk to the patients, they'll tell you about using digital measures, not digital biomarkers. We'll be talking about digital measures.
I agree.
And how we can use them. And there's real progress being made right now. We know that with digital measures, we can reduce patient population, patient sizes in studies. We know we can potentially speed up trials. We know that we can collect the right evidence, but we have to start from the strategy right in the beginning. And I think that's starting to become a picture. Sachin talked about it earlier today. If you start trying to deploy digital measures into a study and it's an afterthought, you're likely to fail, right? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. What's that business quote? So, I think it's important that, as digital measures are growing in this field, we're realizing that we have to start early. We have to get in there at the protocol design stage, at the strategy stage, make this holistic end-to-end solution that starts at phase 1 or phase 2 and goes all the way through to commercialization. And you're planning for how to use digital measures and implement them in studies from the beginning, because that's going to result in evidence that we can take to regulators, the FDA, the EMA, and get things approved, get treatments approved with digital measures. Should we try the next questions, guys?
Sure.
Let's go.
Good.
Okay, practical challenges. Now I guess we'll talk about the hurdles. What are the biggest hurdles in integrating wearable sensors? How do we ensure consistent data capture? And where do most trials stumble? Anyone?
For me, biggest hurdle is still internal stakeholder management. I think you might have gleaned from my talk earlier. There's just not, and I guess, to be honest, the responsibility and probably the cause is us. Maybe we're not selling the right picture to the right people. Hopefully it shouldn't need selling, but unfortunately that's not how the world works. For me, getting the right stakeholders involved early, as you say, early is so key. And I appreciate they've got other things to worry about that are maybe more pertinent to the development of the asset, but having key champions that are in positions to make decision, having them involved early, for me, is still a huge challenge. I think it's getting better, and talking to colleagues across the industry, it definitely sounds like it's getting better, but everyone unanimously still agrees that internal stakeholder management is a big barrier. And to me, it's that point you mentioned about getting in early. I think most people are happy to include them in studies, but it always comes probably too late. Mm-hmm. So the value add is diminished. There is obviously still value. I think in that panel earlier, someone mentioned still continue to put secondary, even exploratory endpoints. But it's a lot easier to do if we start earlier rather than later. So for me, that's still the biggest barrier.
Yeah, I'll riff off that, Sachin, because we have examples where a digital measure has been deployed in a study as an afterthought at the end of the study, and the data will come to us at the end. We're a vendor. We handle data analytics. We see this. And we will find there's a lot of missingness in that type of data. You haven't strategized. You haven't planned to collect this data. You haven't thought about compliance. How do we get the patients to comply with the data collection protocol? Yes, it's a wearable. You're supposed to strap it on, and it's easy. But, there's battery life, and there's all these other things that I know Tom has experimented with a lot. So that becomes a problem if you haven't strategized and you haven't thought about where this is going. The other aspect I want to talk about is a little bit of the siloing that we're a vendor, so we work with these big pharmas. and there's a bit of siloing there. We'll be speaking to one group, and they need to speak to or get buy-in from the next group and the next group. And sometimes it doesn't all come together at the same time. So getting in early is sometimes difficult, at least for a vendor like ours, and it sounds like, Sachin, you were saying, even internally, that's difficult. So, I see that as a stumbling block for really using digital measures to their full capacity in a clinical trial.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit in that I'm stumbling a lot less of these days, because after a long history of kind of putting this together, we're actually getting pretty good at putting it in a way that doesn't typically sort of overburden teams. And my work in early development, it is often as an exploratory endpoint, because we're really starting to generate that early evidence that we can take to regulators to show that this is actually an improvement. In some cases, like some of our diseases, we're not going to innovate on a primary endpoint. It's well established, it's well accepted, but these are really critical supportive data to decision making, especially in totality of evidence kind of considerations. And so it means, I'll say some of my work actually starts well before the trial, and it really goes back to the disease area strategy or the therapeutic area strategy and the molecule strategy and the measurement strategy. What are you trying? This goes back to when we wrote, as part of the DIME digital health for Digital Medicine Society thing of go back, what are you trying to measure? What is the meaningful aspect of health? What do you expect to change? Is it sensitive to change, and is technology matched up to it? Going back to those foundationals versus hey, I saw a really cool gadget somewhere and it's really cool, and I get that a lot from conferences with somebody, I met with this technology vendor, and it's I have to kind of distill that down, look at the validation evidence is there. And I mean, right now, technology is not our limitation. There's a lot of really good tech. The issue is actually how do you deploy it in a way, as you say, that makes sense, that is reliable, that's replicable, it's accurate, it's over time and across countries and these sort of things, which are more logistic. And then, as you say, as you've defined your endpoints up front, and I like to bring the data folks, I work with the analysts, because I don't want to get to a situation where we go to analyze data and it's wow, if we really included that measurement, we could do a lot more with it. And I want to find that out at the beginning and not at the end of the study. So involving them at the start of the study, the analyst folks, so that you can be really holistic in this. And also, for our side, not do single shots. Single molecule, single disease area is a really, really risky place to play. Because if the molecule fails, as we saw with our cough tool, the molecule is no longer there, but the tool worked great. Now, what do you do with it? And so you have to have a portfolio of these sort of things, which are more business level strategic discussions, so you can make the investment, because this stuff is not fast. I know our 95th percentile stride velocity endpoint, it's qualified in the EMA. It's probably not going to be qualified in the US. It's 8 years and counting? For it. We published a paper showing that the agency doesn't actually really provide a lot of support in qualifying things through the DDT pathway. Okay, everyone's going through an IND pathway, just included it with your filing package, but you have to build the evidence, and that kind of piggybacks here and does that kind of stuff. So
that's right, and that's why you have to do that strategy, because you're building that evidence.
Yeah.
Because a treatment has not yet been approved with a digital measure, so you have to bring that evidence to have that happen. And I think we're all working on that, but that's a long pathway. Should we try the next set?
Yeah, I see the middle one about, just back. You mentioned about different devices and platforms. And this is a little pitch about if there's algorithms that are out there to specify what the inputs are. Like, there's a lot of really good accelerometers there, whether you have to downsample or upsample to run the algorithms and such. That might actually help provide some sort of standards, but I don't know if as an industry we can kind of get across that. Maybe you see more of that, because I know you work across devices.
Yeah. I think where I think about that, different devices and harmonization, I think about harmonization, right? You've got to bring these data in, you've got to harmonize them, you've got to make sense of it all together and maybe come up with composite measures. It actually gives you an advantage, potentially, to come up with new evidence that you haven't even thought about before, right? But again, it's got to be planned up front. What are you going to collect? How are you going to collect it? How are you going to integrate it? How are you going to harmonize it in the beginning? So yeah, a consistent data capture platform is important, but maybe a strategy for how to handle the harmonization is even more important.
Okay, now we can advance.
Now we can advance.
No, we're good.
All right, collaboration and infrastructure. I'm going to let these guys talk about it. What internal gaps or processes slow down adoption, and how can cross-functional collaboration accelerate progress? How does a wearable sensor CRO model differentiate and improve on traditional methods? And what capabilities should pharma teams retain?
I'll take a first crack at the first one. I have an interesting thing just learning how our organizational dynamics are in decision making, but I always figure I have two people I need to convince when I work with teams. I have a medical director, because they sign the protocol, and if I haven't made a convincing argument to it, they won't include what I want in my protocol. And as a scientist, I have my things that I want in there. And the other side is, where do I get the funding for it? So there's another part of the organization that actually has to be able to agree to fund it. And these aren't high dollar investments, but they do catch people's attention. And so you have to kind of like know who your actual decision makers are. And that's why I say, who signs the protocol? Because if you don't make a compelling argument, they're not going to include it, and then who funds it? I'll look at the second one about CRO model, differentiate, improve. One of the things I appreciate, because we work with you guys, we work with a number of other CROs, we're very sort of vertically aligned. Our molecules kind of behave as small companies in that regard, so very, very vertical. But you look across devices and across diseases, and you bring a specific thing like, hey, you've worked in COPD for 6 different pharma companies. You might have some perspective on the COPD measures that are going there if we're looking at it for COPD or something like that. And I think that cross-sectional value is really important when we look at some of these measures and you understand some of these discussions. And I think you kind of need both. We hold really, really deep insight into the molecule and how it works and the patient population, all these sort of things, and our context of use. And we also don't typically share externally our clinical data. So you may see a sample of digital biomarker data, but you're not seeing all the other stuff that goes with it. And so I think you need both to really figure out how to actually generate sort of compelling evidence in this space.
Yeah, I think just to add, for me, that cross-functional collaboration piece is so important. And as I said earlier, trying to get stakeholders in the room earlier to ideate what a solution may be. So get them involved in workshops cross-collaboratively around defining concepts of interest based on the research around meaningful aspects of health has been really beneficial in getting that stakeholder alignment to help get products approved. I think simplifying the pathway to success, I think, is quite straightforward. I think for everyone in this room, we know what needs to be done in terms of getting a validated measure, well, what we think needs to be done to get a validated measure across the finish line, but obviously a lot of other people don't. So stage gates approach and are tied in with financial value for us has been really valuable. So just telling the people that make decisions, this is this is a stage gate, and this is how much it costs to that stage gate, the next stage gate, et cetera, so they can upfront see how much money they're going to invest and the risk associated with it. Because obviously the people that do sign the dotted line is all about a risk-based assessment. So presenting that information to them as a risk cost-based analysis, I think for me really helps. I have nothing to add to the second bullet point. For the third one specifically, I found in my experience, so this is around what capabilities should pharma teams retain. Oh, they're on there. Yeah, perfect. Yeah. For me, I think I think we have shifted, and there is definitely more partnerships that happen now between vendors and sponsors, but there is still a large amount of transactional relationships. For me, the biggest partnership area is around data analysis. A lot of vendors offer the data analysis capability, and I think it is sponsors' responsibility to dot the I's and cross the T's, check that work through, work with vendors to create the SOPs and stuff like that, SAPs, and double check their work, because we've had instances where we've worked with vendors and it's been a transactional contract and they've produced work and it just didn't make any sense. And when our data scientists looked through the work, they uncovered a lot of mistakes that had happened, et cetera. And that's not anyone's fault. That's because it shouldn't be left just to one team or one person to do all this analysis. It should be a group effort. Both sides of the party bring different skill sets that together will just hopefully cover all the gaps in that analysis.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to actually reverse this, because I want to talk about capabilities that pharma need to retain. I mean, we're a vendor. We obviously, you guys know your treatment, you know your drug, you know what it's supposed to do, and that's really critical. So as a vendor working with you, we need you to own that, obviously. But I do believe there's an opportunity for a wearable sensor CRO type model to be effective, because it's a specialization. And a wearable sensor digital health technology is a specialization. Sponsors have always used CROs to do specialized work, and I really think sometimes we look at wearable sensors or digital health as because we look at Apple Watch or Fitbit and we say, oh, that's easy. You just put on the Apple Watch and there's data and I can see it on my watch and this is no problem. I can do this. And it's not the case, right? But you guys have got your job to do, so you should do your job. And then there's a potential for vendors to fill in the gaps and solve those internal gaps that are missing there. Come to the forefront with the analytics expertise, or Tom, as you said, with expertise in deploying a wearable sensor in a specific therapeutic area, or with compliance, or expertise with compliance. How to get a patient to wear a sensor for 22 hours a day when you need that data, and know the sensor well enough to know that there's going to be 2 hours of charging each day or whatever a week, and know how much data is going to be missing. Talking about a study that we recently came in and looked at, where they had put the sensor in at the last minute. There was 40%, I believe, missing data. I'll have to check with my scientists. But there was 40% missing data, unusable data in the study. Because you've come in at the end, there's things didn't get recorded, or the patient thought they were wearing it the whole time. They thought they were compliant. The CRO thought they were compliant with the study. But the data was not collected. And having an expert that knows how to do that, salvages the data, means that you can reduce patient recruitment, means that you can speed up the study because you have the data to analyze and take forward with evidence. I see we have 3 minutes, so we're going to go to the last slide, I think. It's perfect. Looking ahead, look at that. So let's talk about what we should do in the future. What innovations or partnerships will unlock the next wave of progress? And if you could change one thing in the ecosystem to accelerate adoption, what would it be? Sachin, you want to start?
I'll take
Tom, you
a
go.
crack on the first one of partnerships. I mean, because we've had some engagements with regulators on acceptability of data and what would they accept for it. And some of it is up to us as pharmas to make a decision and commit to something, and that sort of thing, because we actually have to go to the regulators with the hardware manufacturer. And I know Jeremy from Metris has talked about their MVPA for their PAH work, they have to explain how the algorithms are generated, how the devices are filtered, how do you look at across devices, and we don't have that. But we need that sort of partnership. But basically, we've had to commit to an endpoint, and we have to have enough evidence to go with there. We have to decide on somebody to work with. Mm-hmm. Because, we might in the future, but we're not going to be making a lot of devices. We have some in Roche Dia with their, but not a lot. And I don't think we're going to be producing an accelerometer or an Apple Watch type device. We'll have to work with somebody on that sort of thing. And so once we sort of settle on the measure, we view the measure as valid, we'll have to go to the regulators with the partners in order to show that it's acceptable and that we've truly validated it from using the V3 plus framework, that sort of thing that's acceptable for it. And yeah, if I could change one thing in the ecosystem to accelerate adoption, I don't know. I think we're just building the evidence now, and now it's coming out. I think we've actually kind of changed it, and I think now it's just we need to kind of continue it, and we have to show value of it, and now we feed these data into the algorithms. We're looking at multimodalities and showing true value of it. I think it's going to accelerate on its own. in some respects.
Yeah, I think my 2 cents is I think I see huge value of the coming togetherness of sponsors and vendors, as Tom said, to present the scientific rationale for how and why we're doing something and leading those discussions with regulators. I think it's really important. And we do have some success cases in the industry where companies have come together to do X, Y, and Z to show regulators. I think there's still a lot of work to do there, but at least power in numbers, I think, definitely helps. Power in numbers, if you're all the same level of intelligence. The one thing I would change is I would, and I appreciate this is very hypothetical, but better data sharing between sponsors and vendors. I think there's so much data that's being collected, and if there was some magic way we could have access to other data sets to help validate measures, it would streamline the entire thing and get things done a lot quicker because these data sets would just be accessible and be ready to go to validate novel measures.
Yeah, I'll actually add to that, being able to share externally our clinical data if we can, because that's the hard data to share.
Yeah.
Well, you guys know that I love that because I ask you
Yeah.
all the time for this. No, I agree. I mean, the innovations and partnerships going to the regulators with that evidence together, that's the next innovation that we need. And if we could change one thing is how can we share that clinical data? Which both of you said. So if we can do that, I think we will produce that evidence quicker, and I think we'll get regulators to accept it far quicker. I mean, right now, I know there are companies, we're one of them, in conversation with our partners, with regulators, and hopefully we'll see some swift progress now. I think that's it.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you. Great chat.
Conversation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. That was awesome. I'll take that. Thank you. All right, so the next panel, or the next presentation